44-year-old Marcus Cheney already had a felony warrant for his arrest for allegedly robbing a marijuana store in Lake Forest Park on January 21st, when King County prosecutors say he opened fire at 3rd and Pine on February 27th. Video shows dozens of people scurrying for safety. Seattle police found Reno Mayava on the ground on Pine Street where he fell. He'd been shot 5 times. According to the court documents, Cheney told police he shot Mayava after an argument. He claims Mayava threatened to slap him, but, and I quote, he was not going to let another person put their hands on him. When Cheney was arrested at a Tukwila motel this week, police say he had all of these guns with him and admitted to committing multiple armed bank and marijuana shop robberies.
That's why he started Puget Sound Seafood Distributors. The goal? Buy fish from tribal fishermen, corner the market, and make his fellow fishermen a better payday. In case notes, a detective would write that Shopbell's company was trying to monopolize the Tulalip crab industry. She questioned whether it was, quote, reverse racism, whether the success was too good to be true.
Whether you are a pot smoker or not, all the money it generates, and I mean tons of money, impacts us all. So how much are we talking about? In 2021, Washington State collected nearly $560 million from marijuana sales and license fees. Even more surprising, that is nearly $287 million more than liquor revenue. Since Washington State started collecting taxes in 2014, almost every demographic started using more cannabis. By 2017, nearly 28% of 18 to 24-year-olds said they had used marijuana in the last 30 days. But when you change that question to have you ever used marijuana, the highest percentage of users were those 55 to 64 years old, with nearly 68% saying they have tried pot. So let's follow the money. Where does most of it go? The answer is healthcare. For example, getting low-income people access to healthcare through programs like Medicaid. The second largest chunk goes to the state's general fund. For 2021, it was $191 million, and the general fund pays for some of the state's operating costs and things like K through 12 education.
Imagine for a second an orca. Calls like that traditionally travel miles, allowing family groupings or pods to stay in constant contact. Now, imagine those same calls while vessel traffic is drowning everything out. Scientists have found vessel noise has reduced the area some whales can communicate by 90%. It's not just calls.
911, what are you reporting? Hello? What's going on there? Okay, I'm going to get help started to you. Hold on for me for just a second. Do you know the address that you're at? If I said it, just hang tight, okay? My partner's getting help started to you. Can you hear me? I'm not going to hang up until help is with you, okay?
Border between the colony of Canada and that of the uprooted colonists, our former colonists, the Americans, should run southerly from the Pacific Ocean at the 49th parallel through this widest and mostly used strait of water between it, Vancouver Island, and the mainland.
The Haro Strait is the deepest, widest, best shipping lane, and it said it would go up the best channel. End of story.
They did say the main channel through the islands, which clearly is south of the island, so this is British property.
SPD sent us the cases of 9 people arrested and forwarded for prosecution. We then went to the Seattle Municipal Court documents to see what happened to them. All 9 had been charged with theft by the city attorney, either the next day or up to 6 weeks later. All of them were released from jail the day they were arrested or the next day, with a promise to the judge they would appear at their next court date. Only one paid a $1,000 bail and got out that way. So where are they now? Take Christina Deneen. A State Patrol criminal history shows she has 3 felony, 6 gross misdemeanor, and 6 misdemeanor convictions, mostly for theft. But she has failed to show up for her multiple court dates, as promised, and a warrant has been issued for her arrest. There's Aliyah Rowe, 31, 3 felony convictions, including one for organized retail theft, 13 gross misdemeanors, largely for theft. She's failed to make her court dates, and a warrant has been issued for her arrest. There's Samantha Craner, 32, convicted of 7 gross misdemeanors, mostly theft, failed to report to community court, but they don't issue warrants for arrest in community court. And then there's Rosalinda Warren, 7 felonies, 41 gross misdemeanors, 6 misdemeanors, arrested twice after the Target arrest, is currently in jail for multiple crimes and will stay that way because she's on the city attorney's list of 118 repeat offenders that tie up the court system. So of the 9, 4 have warrants for their arrest, 1 is in jail, nobody's been convicted, nobody's been found not guilty or had their case dismissed. Bottom line, 21 arrests and no justice has been rendered.
Drone video shows how the rushing water gouged out of the hillside above John Surtees' home. It's what lies beneath the soil and debris that's now the focus of the city and state investigation into what caused this disaster. Fox 13 used the city's utility mapping program to investigate, and it shows the pipe that burst was an 8-inch water main laid down in 1960. Part of a network of asbestos-containing pipes throughout the community that were installed before the threat of asbestos exposure was fully understood. That makes this water main 60 years old.
3 private labs have been approved to handle the backlog of kits. The crime lab assigned local law enforcement agencies to each private lab. The local agencies send their kits directly to the labs. The labs process the kits, then send the results to the State Patrol Crime Lab. The crime lab analyzes the results. If a DNA profile is found, the State Patrol uploads it to the FBI's Combined DNA Indexing System, better known as the CODIS database. As of April 7, 2022, 9,606 kits have been submitted for testing. 6,234 kits have been fully tested. Of those, 2,541 have produced usable DNA. That doesn't mean an assault didn't occur in the other 3,000 plus cases. It's possible the attacker wore a condom, didn't leave DNA behind, or that by the time the samples were taken, there was no DNA left. Of the 2,500 DNA samples that have been uploaded to CODIS, there have been 1,400 hits. More than 1,100 linked to offenders whose names and identities are listed in the database, while 270 have matched to other cases, meaning the attacker is a serial rapist who is still on the loose.
58 degrees, the fish start to get stressed. During our heat wave in June of last year, the water in parts of the Lake Washington Ship Canal spiked to above 72 degrees for over a week.
People should not go out and put themselves in harm's way. That's not the moral of the story. But you also have the right to retrieve your stolen belongings.
There are 14 democratically led trifecta states, shown in blue, where the governor and the state houses and senates are controlled by Democrats. 13 of those have or are considering some form of tax rebate or relief. In Colorado and Oregon, it's automatic, because the states will be receiving a surplus of tax revenue next year, except for Washington State, where Governor Inslee and the democratically led House and Senate have no plans for a gas tax relief or rebate.
Redacted emails appear to show members of the AG's office guiding the prosecution, and there's been questions about whether the charges themselves were shopped. Documents show cases were floated in Pierce, King, Snohomish, Kitsap, and eventually Skagit, where this latest ruling came in. A judge called all of it troublesome.
All 4 Kitsap County District Court judges, in an 89-page ruling in a run-of-the-mill DUI case, said the results from the machine violate state law.
Here's the technicality. The Draeger machine takes 4 samples of a person's breath to determine the blood alcohol level, and then creates a median number that's the center point of all those 4 samples that's multiple decimal points long. But state law says the machine must round out that number to 3 decimal points up or down. And since the machine doesn't do that, the court found it violated state law, and those numbers cannot be used in court.
Tire manufacturers say they hadn't known 6-ppd-quinone even existed. However, its parent chemical compound, 6-ppd, is touted as a critical safety feature in car tires. Without 6-ppd, tires are more quickly attacked by ozone.
In all, 31 men from nearly a dozen states were arrested and booked on conspiracy to riot a misdemeanor. 5 of the men call Washington home, including 36-year-old James Johnson from Concrete, 27-year-old Justin O'Leary from Des Moines, and 23-year-old Colton Brown from Ravensdale. From Eastern Washington, 22-year-old Michelle Buster from Spokane, and 20-year-old Spencer Simpson from Ellensburg. By Monday, each man had bonded out of jail and told to return to court.
Jamie Jo writing to DCYF in October of 2019 that Oakley saw Jordan hit Andrew during a weekend visit. The very next month, DCYF and the courts still returned Oakley to her biological parents for good. Then, in November 2021, she raised the red flag again after hearing about a fire at Oakley's house.
Just take a look at the latest numbers from the Puget Sound Auto Theft Task Force. 1,381 vehicles stolen just last month in King County, up from 1,174 in November. In Pierce County, 915 vehicles stolen in December, up from 800 in November. And that's more than double during the same period in 2020.
Shirley says he does have a 3-pronged approach to address the uptick. He calls it the PIE: prevention, intervention, enforcement.
Guns are not allowed inside this event. Block Party officials said in a statement it has its own security and protocols and are working with SPD for support all weekend.
Annual report categorizes all citizen complaints against SPD and says last year there were nearly 3,000 contacts made by the public. 1 in 5 made allegations of unprofessional conduct. But use of force allegations were down 19% from 2020, the year of CHOP and protests. And a quarter of all allegations, 185, the OPA said were valid. Unprofessionalism was the biggest allegation made. The use of force was 4th. But half of sworn officers, 461 of a year-end total of 958, had received at least 1 complaint. As for officer punishment, most received a written reprimand and 2 were terminated flat out and didn't quit for allegations the OPA had sustained.
CFWS stands for Child and Family Welfare Services, which is under DCYF. Melanie worked there for 13 years, last half of that as a CFWS supervisor before she chose to walk away.
It wasn't until the late 80s that the species was detected in California. By the late 90s, they'd made it into Oregon and Washington in small numbers. Nowadays, we're seeing them from Dungeness Spit up to Samish Bay and Drayton Harbor.
He was free on $200,000 bail and wanted for failing to appear in court stemming from an assault charge. In that case, he's accused of beating a 62-year-old man in an alleyway outside of a restaurant. That man was hurt so badly, doctors thought he might die from a brain bleed.
21 people were arrested, 18 booked into jail by special arrangement, SPD told us, because normally shoplifting cases aren't booked into jail.
Brent Lyle's group, Friends of the San Juans, have put together a projection of vessel traffic increases for the Salish Sea. 22 projects are being planned between our state and Canada. That would add thousands of ocean-bound vessels every year. Those Canadian projects alone are capable of increasing traffic by 25%. But when it comes to projects along Washington's shores, there's less available information. One recommendation of the governor's Orca task force was to look at how permit applications in Washington state that could increase traffic and vessel impacts could be required to explicitly address potential impacts on orcas.
House Bill 1310 was intended to address complaints of excessive use of force and required officers to act with reasonable care when carrying out their duties, including using de-escalation tactics and alternatives to deadly force. House Bill 1054 changed police tactics, such as a law enforcement agency may not acquire or use any military equipment, and a peace officer may not engage in a vehicular pursuit, except under specific circumstances.
Are bringing back centuries-old tribal techniques, floating evergreen branches, sometimes entire trees, in the Nisqually Reach, much like the tribe once did to capture herring eggs.
To roll up several different agencies into one large agency. That includes Child Protective Services, foster care, family assessment response, and early childhood education. In July 2017, the governor signed a law creating the Department of Children, Youth, and Families to do just that. and appointed Ross Hunter, a former Microsoft executive and state legislator, as secretary. 2 years later, oversight of juvenile rehabilitation and detention services were added to the agency.
Chief John Patisse has decided rather than reprogram the breathalyzers to match state law, the patrol wants to change the law to match the machine's calculation, saying it's being done to correct an administrative oversight with the line, "It is intended to be remedial in nature." But a patrol spokesman says that does not mean retroactive going back 7 years.
Prosecutors asked that she be held on $150,000 bail. Instead, Commissioner Craig Adams set her bail at just $5,000.
As this graph shows, the backlog of cases grew dramatically during the tenure of former City Attorney Pete Holmes, from just 2,000 in 2019 to 5,000 when Davison took over in January. The pandemic suspending trials was one reason. Guys on that list, like Stephen Rich, 38 years old, has had 73 cases sent by Seattle police to the city attorney for prosecution, 57 since 2017. The majority, 43, are for theft. Checking with the State Patrol, he's been convicted of 35 gross misdemeanors, 10 misdemeanors, and 25 non-felony violations. He's currently in jail for multiple theft cases.